Welcome to the chapter 4 notes. We're going to be looking at cells, and so we're going to do one part where we're going to look at animal cells, and then we're going to look at a plant cell. So we're going to draw a cell. So we're going to start with, and you can draw your cell kind of any shape if you feel like it. So what I have just drawn there is the cell membrane. And its job is it controls what enters and exits the cell. And we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the cell membrane later, so we're just going to know it controls what enters and exits the cells. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and draw probably the most important part of a cell that is familiar to everybody, and that is going to be our nucleus. Okay, so this is our nucleus. And our nucleus, a lot of people call it the control center, and it's where all the DNA is, where DNA is stored. And it's surrounded by a membrane, right? Because it's a eukaryotic cell. Also, part of the nucleus, or in the nucleus, is, you'll see it's usually represented as a little dot. It's the nucleolus. And what it does is it produces ribosomes. That's where ribosomes are made. And then the last thing that you'll see in a nucleus, and you don't always see them quite like that, but for this picture we'll do it, is the chromatin, or chromosomes. And chromatin is DNA and proteins combined. So just think it's the DNA, or your genes, same, okay, that's where that's also stored in. That's the job of the nucleus. And then the other thing that's really important in a animal cell that you might see is a mitochondria, and you actually will probably have more than one mitochondria, and there's two membranes in a mitochondria. You kind of can draw them like that. And a mitochondria, it is the site of cellular respiration. It is where animal cells turn glucose into, or they harvest the energy that's in glucose into ATP. Okay. Another thing that you might see and is the ER. So we'll draw our ER. And there's actually two types of ER. So we're going to draw the rough one first. And usually they're represented like this, little flat pancakes. And so if this is a rough ER, we need to draw some little bumps on it. And those little bumps we'll talk about in a second, but we'll kind of just put them on there. So this is our rough ER. And ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum. And what it does is it channels, it helps the proteins fold when they're on there. Proteins to the vesicles, and it helps them fold properly in their correct three-dimensional shape. And the reason why it has to deal with proteins is because of these little green guys that we drew, and those are ribosomes. And their job is they produce proteins. And you can actually have ribosomes that are attached to the ER, and you can have ribosomes that are floating around, and they're called free ribosomes. And those ribosomes, these ones produce proteins for the cell. These ones produce proteins that are going to go outside the cell. And then the other thing that you might have that's somewhat related is a, let's try a different color, is a Golgi apparatus. And they're also kind of represented by these little pancakes. And that Golgi, what it does is it modifies ER products, so proteins, it modifies them. It might add like carbohydrates or might add lipids, and then it produces lysosomes and vesicles. We'll look at that on the next page. Okay, and then we are also missing, we haven't talked about, there's another type of ER that you might see in a cell. That's the last thing we're going to draw. Well, we're going to label the inside. So you might actually see another type of ER, which is the smooth ER. And the smooth ER, I don't know why I did that in capital letters. The smooth ER Its job is it produces lipids. So all the phospholipids for your membrane, steroid hormones, any kind of lipids. And it also detoxifies drugs and poisons that get into a cell. So really, it has nothing, the rough ER has to do with proteins, and all this stuff has to do with proteins. And then the last thing we're going to just label is the cytoplasm. All this space of the cell. Oh. Cytoplasm. And that's just the space, okay? It's just the space of the cell, and it's actually really not just, like, it's not empty space. There's actually a lot of fluid in there, and there's actually a whole network of microtubules and microfilaments that help move vesicles and things around. So it is very controlled of how things move around inside the cytoplasm. Okay, we're going to spend a few moments and kind of zoom in on these three guys and look at how they interact. We'll spend a whole unit looking at this and a whole section looking at this, but we're going to really spend some time right now looking at the endomembrane system, these three guys. So that's what this picture we're going to draw is going to be about. So in the endomembrane system, let's just say, here's my cell membrane. I'm going to draw kind of a cell membrane. And here is my rough ER again. And you can kind of have it like, it kind of is just a bunch of membrane folds like that. And so it's a rough ER because it's got my ribosomes. Okay. So this is my rough ER with ribosomes. And what it's going to do is it's going to make little protein products, and they're going to end up in little vesicles, little membrane bound things. Okay, so these are the vesicles going from the ER to the Golgi. So we need to draw my Golgi apparatus in. Here it is. So once the protein's made, it's going to get a little bit modified in the ER and folded correctly, and then it's going to go into vesicles over to the Golgi apparatus, where in my Golgi, it's going to modify ER products. So it might cut them, it might add pieces together, and it's going to package the proteins. And it's going to send them generally in two places. So one of those two places is it might become a vesicle that actually ends up going all the way there, and it fuses like that with the cell membrane, and it will release all of its products to the outside. So if this is like a pancreatic cell and it needs to release the hormone insulin, that's what's going to happen there. Okay, so it's a... So these are called secretory vesicles that carry products to the outside. The other place that a vesicle might end up going is, I'm going to kind of have this vesicle go really far down here. And it might actually meet up with another part of, here's my cell membrane. So we're going to have a cell membrane. It's actually, we're going to have a little vacuole that's going to suck in some particles. And so here's that vacuole. Okay. So it's maybe taking in some food from the outside, and it's going to, they're going to fuse. So my original, this vesicle and this vesicle will fuse together, and they come together, and this one is actually going to be what's called a lysosome. Okay, so it's gonna come off with all of its products, and the lysosome, what it does is it carries enzymes to dissolve or break down, let's use that word, break down products. Okay, so that's what the lysosome does. So it's this is stuff that I want to break down and maybe use in my cell. So it might be like a piece of a protein and I want to use the amino acids, or it might be some food and I want to break it down to use for energy. Okay, so those are all the options of kind of things that can happen from when you start with a protein and the kind of the path that it can travel. It either can be secreted or it can be used to hydrolyze enzymes. Okay, so that's all happening in animal cells, and actually it's also all happening in plant cells as well, but plant cells they are special. So they actually have some extra layers. So we're going to draw a plant cell, and for whatever reason, plant cells are more square, and actually there is a reason. And that is because, I'm going to draw it in deep green, because plant cells also have a large cell wall floating around them. Not floating, it's attached. So that's my cell wall. And that cell wall is, it provides protection. It also maintains the shape. It's partially why plants can't move, because their cells are so rigid. And it also is made of cellulose, as we know, a carbohydrate. Okay. Other things that plants have, we'll make a list of the things that they have in the same with a animal cell in a second, but other things that they have as extra bonus items, you could say, is they have a mitochondria. Or sorry, nope, that's not a bonus item. We all have mitochondria, but they have a chloroplast. That's what I was trying to go for. So there's a chloroplast, and chloroplasts are usually green in color, or greenish in color. Mine's not super green. So that's my chloroplast. Okay. And they would have lots of chloroplasts. We can draw like 5 or 6. I mean, they have lots of chloroplasts in a single plant cell. And it is the site of photosynthesis. It is where photosynthesis occurs. Okay. And they contain chlorophyll, which makes them a kind of greenish color, even though mine are more blue. And then the other thing that plant cells have that animal cells do not have, so like another bonus item, you could say, is they have this giant central vacuole. Okay, it's just a huge, it takes up most of the space of a plant cell. So this is called the central vacuole. You saw some little vacuoles in animal cells, but it helps if I spell central right, but not so much. And then the job of this is it's for storage. It is a disposal site for waste. Okay, it may contain poisons or things that may not be like palpable chemicals, so things that don't taste good contain poisons or unpalatable chemicals okay, and it helps with cell growth too. So it has a lot of jobs, and only plant cells get them. Okay, now the other thing is, the last part that I'm going to kind of just run through real quick, is plant cells also have many of the same things that animal cells have. So they also, and so we can draw some of them in, so they also would have a nucleus with a nucleolus and the DNA in there. So we can kind of label it nucleus. They would also have a ER, and with the ribosomes, so they would have a rough ER, and they would also have free ribosomes cruising around. So those are ribosomes. And they do the exact same things that they do in the animal cell. So so that's all true. All the things that we did on the first 2 pages is all true for an animal cell as well. They have a cell membrane, just like, that does the exact same things a cell membrane does in an animal cell. They have, what have we not drawn in? Oh, a Golgi apparatus. We need one of those. And we have not drawn in a mitochondria. They would have a mitochondria, just the same. Oop. Kind of ran out of space. So that is a terrible mitochondria, but that is a mitochondria. Okay, and they would have lots of them, just like an animal cell would. So they share all the same things as an animal cell, and they just get a couple bonus things. They get a cell wall, they get chloroplast, and they get a central vacuole as their bonus items. So that's it on cells and all the cell parts.